Welcome to episode 23, and I am so excited to get to the this podcast today. I'm with Peter Hall, and I'm with my very special special guest and good friend, a bit tongue-tied today, Mr. Ash Jones, who I've known. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Ash.
Afternoon.
And Ash and I remember speaking to him. I was at a service station in Warwickshire, charging up my Tesla, and I remember having my first ever conversation with you about about your past and what you were doing next. And I think it's fair to say, over the last couple of years, we actually established quite a good working partnership. Certainly,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because I think it really, for me, the journey started back with Pete and I going to South by Southwest. This must have been, was this probably 3 years ago where Vaynerchuk was on stage? And
3 years ago.
3 years ago. And Casey, how'd you say his second name? Casey Neistat.
Casey Neistat.
Neistat. I say Neistat, you say Neistat.
Between the three of us,
you'll get it. And they were both on stage and both in front of me. And I just had this kind of awakening to just the power of the way that I could just see every little detail about what they were wearing, how they were speaking, the presentation, and it really set me off on a bit of a journey. So when I spoke to you that day, I really felt that what you did was almost the next big thing. And I remember thinking, you're going to be a really good guy to know, and you've proved to be that person. So. And obviously, my one of my fondest memories is when we first really met, and you actually kindly spoke at one of our events, and you told your story. The first time I'd really heard your whole story for the first time, and I was pretty mesmerized. So I'm going to get you to try and share that story with us now. So tell me, how did agency life begin for you?
I was just looking through my, I've got the screenshot on my computer, and I've been thinking how I can use it. And it's the first message that I sent to Steve Bartlett. And it was 2012. I met him at an event, not an agent, like nothing like that. I met him at a battle rap event. And someone introduced us. He was like 18. I was just starting university. And someone said, "Oh, you should talk to Steve. He's like doing business," and I was just about to study marketing. So I spoke with him at the event, and then I added him on Facebook, and I sent him a message, and it was like 2nd of May 2012. And I just said like, "Hey, how did that thing you were doing the other day go? Look, I'm just starting university. I know I've heard about the importance of like networking. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here." He was literally the first person that I ever spoke to in like, I don't know, a career sense,
a business sense,
which is just like the best luck in the world. Like, I struck lucky first time, and I sent that message. I said like, "Oh, I'd love to get involved in what you're doing if you're looking for someone's help." And then he didn't respond. And the screenshot is like 3 weeks later. I kind of like pointed up to the other message, to the first message, and said like, "Haha." And I just thought it was like this real sliding doors moment. Like, imagine I just never responded to that message. Where I don't know where I'd be right now without that guy. We kind of go back quite far, but where it really turned was like late 2014. He'd just secured investment for Social Chain, and the aim of that investment was to start building a team. And I reached out to him as we were both in London at the time. I'd just moved there, and he was there. And I said, "Have you got anything going on at the minute?" He said, "Yeah, we've just secured investment for Social Chain. We're looking to build a team. Are you interested?" So I went over and met him, had a chat, beat him on FIFA, as I always do.
Just get that in quickly.
I got to get that in there just in case he sees this.
We'll make sure we edit that out, and we'll put that on social media, that one particular bit.
Yeah, that'd be great. When we initially sat down, I got the role, like my job title was marketing director, and I'm third year of uni. I just started my third year of uni. My jobs before that were like, I was a cleaner. and I was in a call center, and I never lasted more than 3 weeks in a call center. So for me to go from that to having the role of marketing director,
I mean, why
was
didn't they
like,
go the full hog and make you chief marketing officer?
I don't know.
There needs to be somewhere to go, right?
Yeah, there needs to be some uplift.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had that job title, and I remember sitting down with Steve, and we were like, what's the aim of this? And he said, the only KPI that you'll have in this job is to make social chain known. And he was like, how you do that is up to you, but that's the aim, to brands and agencies alike. So nobody knows who social chain are at all in the agency world, and not a single brand knows who social chain are. So that's your job, is to make that happen. He said, how you do it is completely up to you. So the first year, I literally Googled, what does a marketing director do? And there's an image that I found, and it's like a list of conventional B2B marketing tactics. And It's like social media, white papers, events, newsletters, all that kind of thing. So I just did all that. And at the end of the first year, we went to Wales, I think it was, to like senior management to review the year. And we sat, it was absolutely chucking it down. And we reviewed what I was doing, and we looked at how social chain was marketing itself at that time. And what we didn't realize, or what I definitely didn't realize, was that whilst I was trying to achieve that KPI, Steve was also trying to achieve the same KPI of making social chain known, but we were going about it in very different ways. He was going about it from a sales point of view, and I was going about it from a marketing point of view. And we sat down and looked at where all the revenue came from the company in that first year, and 80% of it could be attributed to Stephen Bartlett in some way, shape, or form, and then 0% from all of my activity. And we were actually at a loss, because I was on a wage, and we'd also like paid for events. We had a marketing budget. So it was actually at a loss, all the things that we were doing. So it became like crystal clear in that moment that we have to fundamentally, at this moment in time, change how we do marketing. And the answer of what to do was stood right in front of us. It had driven 80% of the business already.
Yeah.
And obviously this was like late 2015. The Gary Vaynerchuk thing was like really taking off. And we just thought there was an opportunity there in the UK, that there was no one in the UK that had the only business people that that are like celebrities or influencers in the UK were like Peter Jones and Alan Sugar. They were on TV. They weren't on the internet.
Yeah.
And we were the kids of the internet. So we thought, we know how to do this. Why don't we just apply what we're doing for brands to Steve? And it was something that me and Steve had privately kind of like back and forth on for a while, that we said like, oh, you should just start a YouTube channel or this kind of thing. And it just made sense. So we kind of like threw caution to the wind with it. And the first few months, it was something that happened outside of business hours. So we'd go into the office at like 2 a.m. and we'd film until 6. And then the next day, like, people are coming and you get on with what you were doing. It was something that we kind of had to prove it would work before it became like a real thing. So the first 6 to 9 months was just repeating that process of like those late nights, late nights, 4 a.m, filming in the office, and you're like take after take after take after take. And then there was one real pivotal moment where he landed a TEDx talk. I can't remember where it was. And I remember spending the night in the office beforehand, and we storyboarded the whole talk and went through it, put it up on a wall in the office, and like, he just nailed it. And then he went and did it the next day. And I just remember thinking like, this is it. That's it. Like he smashed it out the park. And that TED talk, we put it on Facebook, and it did over 1 million views on Facebook.
Wow.
And it was like, right, okay, there's really something here. And then we knew that we needed to build a team around it, and it needed to be a full-time focus. And that's when the shift happened. And we started building the foundation of it there, and it kind of over the coming years grew to everything that you see now, so to speak.
And I think what's really, I mean, I've heard you talk, you've spoken to me a few times about those early years, and what I love about what you just shared with us is, I think sometimes people think that, was that saying there's no such thing as an overnight success? The fact that you guys were grafting and working so hard, it's like even the story, but we're streaming this via Skype today onto YouTube, and I remember hearing the early stories about Skype in the early days. They spent years writing software that would integrate into people's contact lists and spamming, and you hear all the early stories of social media. They often have to spend years and years and years practicing and in some cases spamming. But I love the fact that actually there was a lot of hard work behind it. This didn't just happen, right? Did it? The fact that Steve, it was even rehearsing those talks and practicing, I think that's a real testament. And I remember you said to me once that also you were always testing different approaches and new ways of doing things. Tell us about that.
So on the point of like the hard work, so we started the personal brand thing like early 2016 as a full-time focus, and early 2016, and I remember in November 2016 the only platform that we focused on was Facebook, and there was 2 full-time members, me and someone else at that time, and in 1 week we got 7 likes on his Facebook page, which is just like, you're paying 2 full-time people and their only job is to grow that Facebook page, and 7 months later there's a week where we only get like the tiniest bit of growth.
Even he gets more likes than that.
Yeah, and
I get 8 or 9 now.
It just kind of shows like the first 9 to 12 months was like, it really, you could have easily given up on it. But we stuck with it. And on your other point, I think it's super important that people understand that the hard work, like, I always think there's always some team out there that's like Social Chain in those early days, and you just don't know it yet. Yeah. And they're like grafting like crazy. That first year at Social Chain was insane. But like we lived in the office for a year, and that's all we did. And you couldn't talk any one of us out of doing it because we just absolutely love doing it. And there's probably companies like that, little startups popping up all over the UK right now that are just hustling way, way, way hard.
I must admit.
What was the other part of your question? I can't remember.
It was just around the experimentation. The fact that you always said that Steve wasn't afraid to test and try different approaches, and I think that's.
He said
tell us about that.
He said it recently that it's like it makes him really difficult to work with, and he openly says that. He says it's the thing that makes me difficult to work with is that every single day I'm like pushing to try new things, and he's right. It made him really difficult to work with because it never let you rest. Every single day it was like, how can we do something differently, new ideas, and especially when like it's going really well and you feel like you've cracked it, you've got it, and you've spent so long trying to get it and all the hard work that you just kind of want to like take your foot off the gas now you figured it out. And he would never ever let up. And it's the thing that's why he's where he is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of very, very talented entrepreneurial business owners, and it is that creative tenacity, and setting the benchmark and pushing everyone around you, inspiring everyone around you to be better. But the fact that he wasn't afraid to keep testing and trying new things, and because the thing about testing stuff is that it can go wrong, it could go wrong, right? But the fact that he was willing to put himself out there and test new formats and test new things. I do remember actually when in the early days, I think he spoke actually at one of my now clients, one of their events. I think this was probably even before, this is quite early on. And he apparently turned up with a small entourage, did his talk and then left, and
Were you
I
in the
remember thinking to myself, sorry?
The entourage.
Yeah, he was like,
yeah.
like J-Lo or someone, I don't know, some superstar. But anyway, I remember thinking at the time, like, and I was so wrong, by the way, to think this, but I was thinking, how do they fund from an agency perspective? As someone who's, built a lot and worked with a lot of friends who run agencies, how does he fund this team of people to be constantly around him, freeing him up to be able to go and do that job full time? But, when I think about it, it's just such a stupid thing to think, because the return on investment, like when one of the things that people that know, if they've read our book and they know us well, we're always talking about, setting targets around number of speaking events you do a year. And I remember, I think it was last December, Stephen wrote a post saying he just completes his, and I don't know what, the 58th speaking event of the year. And I'm sitting there telling my customers, they should try and do 1 to 2 speaking events a month. Yeah. And he's doing probably 1 to 2 every working week, right? So maybe
and
more.
they're globally as well.
And they're global as well. Exactly. Yeah.
So you got the travel
and I know that some of the pipelines, Ash, that I've seen, the biggest deals come from speaking events. So the fact that he is able to go out and speak on that stage, his network and his personal brand has become augmented to a point where only really, in my view, Vaynerchuk, you could argue in the old days, you had like the Ogilvies and the Morris and Charles Saatchis, and you could argue about the Chiat days and some of the really well-known ad guys, maybe I'd say Bob Greenberg, from RGA, and there were some really good personalities that stood out, but I think he's done an incredible job to leverage himself right up there, and it's great hearing those stories from you about those early days. And I love the fact that the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? So none of this stuff happens overnight. It takes a bit of graft, and I'm pleased you guys are telling me that's what happened, and it wasn't just he just sent a post out and it all.
No. It's even now. It's like I say, we first started speaking like 2012, and Social Chain didn't start till 2014, and then it could have gone it could have failed in late 2015, and if it would have failed at that point, technically it was like 4 years up from where it started to that. So yeah, it's never an overnight thing. It's just we moved at like a ridiculous. Well, Steve moves at a ridiculous pace, so things happen quick.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So let's forward the clock a little bit. So you did this for a few years, and then I remember one day you ringing me up saying, right, I'm going alone. I've left. I'm going to be doing Great Influence. Your new business, and you actually made this comment about you've been so busy helping Steve with his personal brand that you realized that actually you were starting a business and you didn't have anything really yourself.
I had nothing, absolutely nothing. And I said this to someone the other week, that when I left, I posted on LinkedIn that I'd left, and it was the only thing that I did was just post on LinkedIn. I got like 25 meetings out of that post, and it got like 180 likes.
Which is pretty good, to be fair.
It's good, but I think that it was just because I've come from Social Chain, it naturally opens doors, and I think back to it now, and I'm like, if I'd have done what I know now throughout that whole journey from day one of Social Chain, of being even during university, if I'd have started it when I was at university and documented the journey that I'd been on, my network would be insane in comparison. And the opportunity, when it came to me deciding that I was going to leave Social Chain and start up on my own, the opportunities that I could have leveraged by that point, just from documenting what I was going through on LinkedIn once a week or once every 2 weeks, would have been tenfold minimum. But I never did. And I was fortunate that the name was enough, that my laziness of building a presence for myself, or even networking, I didn't network with anyone during Social Chain. And my laziness wasn't it wasn't a victim. Fortunately, I was able to. The name just coming from Social Chain alone and Steve Bartlett it opened a lot of opportunities for me, and thank God it did, because I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing. It would have been the biggest mistake, but now I'm like, it doesn't matter now. But looking back, it was the number one mistake that I made for 4 or 5 years, to not like document that journey. And I was meeting so many people, and I just never even connected with them on LinkedIn afterwards. Or anything like that. They're just emails that disappeared through my inbox and never to speak again. So
I don't think that's a unique thing. Like, I think it's quite a common thing to be in that situation. I mean, when Pete and I, when we left our agency, I remember I never really thought I'd actually work again in agency world. I was going to go and do another completely separate business. But I do remember sitting out opposite where I am now and writing out all of the ways that trying to remember all the ways I'd won new business, because I thought this might come in handy one day in the future. But Pete, did you? I mean, we didn't really, we didn't take away anything from our business either, really. Think about, because if actually we probably could have made some good notes, couldn't we, on what we'd learned?
It's almost like it was like a door closed and then, you walk through another one. Like there was like two separate things. I mean, for me, stepping into a whole new world. So I didn't really take anything from it at all. And I actually thinking like really relating to your story right now.
Yeah, but what I would say now is that I think your message is really, really important for other agency leaders now to share with their teams and say to them, look, when you leave this company and you go somewhere else, whether it's your own business or another job, try and develop some kind of personal brand, or make sure you've understood the work that you do, because it may be of value to you in the future. I think a lot of people don't contribute in teams towards their company's social media because they don't see what's in it for them. But actually they should be a bit more selfish. It probably will benefit them, because I'm sure in the future a lot of employers will be looking to see whether the people they're interviewing have got any kind of social media following or some kind of asset that would add value to the company.
I've seen it already. I've seen it with people. I've heard conversations where part of the deciding factor is that person has is
amazing
public presence. Yeah, and they do public speaking, and that sways it, or they create content online, and that goes to part of them getting certain jobs. I've seen it several times.
Yeah, and I run lots of surveys on where new business comes from, and existing team members always appears in the top 10, and along with speaking events and networking and referrals. But it's like, team referrals, and obviously the bigger your team network is, the more likely they are to help bring value in. So it's really interesting. You're saying you've already seen that. I think that's going to be a really big growing trend for recruiters, and a good one for candidates to bear in mind. So you started Great Influence. Let's forward the clock a bit more now. And I know you came and did that talk with us, and I know everyone that day was really impressed. And
it's brilliant. There's so much good feedback on that.
Yeah, it was great.
A little bit worried afterwards, because I think you dropped a swear word in there.
Yes.
You're a bit like, and I was like, no, everyone thought it was great.
You then posted it on LinkedIn and said, should I have sworn? And everyone backed you and stuff on it.
Yeah. I was just I was 6 months in at that point, and it was like I just never thought I could do what I'm doing now. So I was constantly in those first 6 to 12 months looking around for reassurance, is this okay? Am I doing the right thing? Just naivety.
Yeah, and that event, we funny enough, I remember we called it Agency Owners as Influencers, because I'd come back seeing Ben and Chuck, and obviously I'd seen what Stephen Bartlett, and it was obvious that if at the time, if I looked at all of the fastest growing agencies, it appeared they all seemed to be led by people who weren't hiding behind the company brand. They were bringing their personality to the forefront. And when you think around the world at Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and some of the biggest, most successful businesses, maybe even go back to Henry T. Ford, and over time there was always a personality, a personal brand alongside the brand. But I feel like in the noughties that got lost a little bit, and that actually brands tried to almost overtake the individual. And I think anyway, so I saw that happening, and we ran that agency event, ACO's Influencers, and your talk couldn't have been better really, because it was because of your past. And I think from that moment onwards, I've just seen this, and I think agency owners are often good at uptaking things early. And I think I don't know, it just feels like everyone I meet now is, especially coronavirus has accelerated even more. But I've noticed now that all the leaders are starting to build their personal brands and develop on it. And I know that I've been sending lots of people your way to help them. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for that.
They all have this fear, don't they? So I guess the first thing I wanted to cover was the fear that everyone has this fear of putting themselves out there or having a point of view. Can you talk to me about that?
I mean, we see it a lot. And it's strange that people who are like business owners are really like quite fearless people, willing to take risks and every single day, and yet they've got fear over this. And one of the questions whenever I do panels or something like that, and you open it up to questions, it's like, how do I start? And how do I start always comes across as a tactical question. And I don't think what they're really trying, the reason why they can't start is because they don't know the tactics. I think it's because it's psychological why they can't start. And I think it's down to a couple of things at play, in that the pressure now is building in that other people are doing it, and it's becoming a thing that they can't ignore as much anymore. And also, you've got people that have been building reputations for 5, 10, 15, 20 years in ways that they're comfortable in now, in terms of networking or public speaking or however. And social media worries them because they don't quite get it, or they don't quite think that they can leverage it in the right way. And another thing that may be at play is the fact that cancel culture exists online. So you can get cancelled for what you say online, and it's a business risk. What you say can put your business at jeopardy. Yes. So all these factors kind of come into play, in that it takes a brave person to actually be able to voice themselves. And one of the biggest lies that I always hear is, I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything interesting to say. And I'm a business owner of a one-person business that's like super narrow. Yes. I don't have a team. I don't have many conversations. I don't have many meetings. I don't have all these things going on. And yet I have loads of things going on in my head through the week. So if I have that much going on, then people with teams that are trying to actively scale businesses forward, the challenges across departments, the challenges across clients, the challenges across the actual service that they do and how that's changing in the industry and all these things, to sit there and say that you don't have anything worthwhile to say is just, it's just nonsense. Yeah. But that comes from a place of fear or insecurity, more likely, in that they don't believe that they have something valuable to say. Yeah. And there's a lot of overthinking it as well, and perfectionism that comes into play, in that what you want to say has to be perfect. It has to provide lots of value. It has to position you as a great business leader and a great thought leader. And I don't think that's the truth at all. If anything, it gets in the way of doing those things. Like, you'll know better than anyone, it's consistency. Turning up for a long time is the key. And you can't be consistent if you're a perfectionist with social media. You have to be there every few days, and perfectionism doesn't come in that format. It's way more off the cuff. So yeah, I think that the anxiety, insecurity, and fear aspect of it are hugely understated things. And the thing that I actually didn't realize I'd be working on, I didn't realize I'd be working on that thing. I just thought my job was tactical. And I started to realize over time with interactions with clients that my job is like, tactic is just like, if anything, it's like step 2 and step 3 and step 4. Step 1 is actually helping convince that person that what's going on in their world and the opinion that they have is valuable and is valid. And I've noticed it a lot more in that I've worked with some really cagey people, and the interesting thing is that usually I'm intro to them, which means that they want the conversation, and that means that they recognize that it's something that they should be doing or want to be doing. But then I'll talk to them and I can feel they're like closed off and super icy and really cagey and dead skeptical, and as I go through the process with them, it's almost like they need a sounding board, and they trust in me to say that, wait a minute, this is brilliant what you're saying here. And to them, it's just so menial, and you don't even think that there's anything in those points of view. So yeah, it's almost like
I have first-hand experience that, because one of my clients who I put in touch with you because they weren't posting, enough. I remember speaking to him after he'd had a chat with you, and he'd obviously relayed some things to you, and you'd repeated them back. And I think hearing them back, he realized how good they were, but he didn't think they were good enough, right? And it was almost like whatever your process is, I think is also very, very good at helping people realize. And also then I think it unlocked a load of other things that this person could talk about that he didn't even think about, And I guess there's also a bit of a routine. I remember seriously, like 2.5, 3 years ago, all I ever did was like other people's posts and share them. And I was I was that person. I knew a lot, but I didn't really share what I knew. And then it was actually James Potter, the LinkedIn guy, who said, I've looked at your LinkedIn profile and I haven't got a clue what you do, because all you do is you like everybody else's posts. So I know what they all do, but it was that realization. And that, I think that Vaynerchuk comment years ago about, talk about the process, I think those things for me clicked. But I've learned now that the more I write, and I've learned tricks like through the day, I write things down when they happen. I try and keep notes all the time on little things people say, and then it turns into content. But I think where you really help is I've actually got Pete and Mark, so I can send them messages, and Abby, and go, what do you think about this? And sometimes you do need to have a voice, don't you, to sort of say, yeah, that sounds really good.
Well, and the way that we work with our posts is I think I'm reasonably okay at writing the post, but I struggle to find the idea. So Spencer will give me what I call a trigger, like a word or a phrase or something that's happened, and then I can boom, I've got something now, I can go and write about that.
Yeah, and he'll write it in like 1 minute, and then I'll have an idea. It'll take me 2 days to write like 4 lines or whatever. So he can write really well, but I've got the ideas. I think we need to merge ourselves together, Pete, and then we'll get more content out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I think as well that it's an activity that you do to help market you as an entrepreneur in your business, but I think it makes you a better. It's all about original thinking for me, and this is why Steve Bartlett's so good. In that, when the game for me is about observing and reflecting two worlds: your internal world and your external world. And your internal world is your business and everything going on within it. Observing and reflecting what is happening there on a week-to-week basis to try, like you say, pull out the potential ideas, and then it's about turning those ideas into engaging content. That's another conversation. And then there's the external world, which is like your industry and current affairs and how that links into what you do as a business. And the people who are really good at this thing are the people who genuinely sit there in their spare time and chew the fat on those thoughts. And they're looking for realizations, observations, conclusions, interesting points of view. And whenever I spend time with Steve, he is how you see him on social. Like he's talking to you in quotes almost, because he's unraveling the situations that he's going through vocally with you in a conversation, in a completely private conversation, and he'll come up with little analogies for things and realizations that make you think about it in a different way. And I've personally experienced it where the minute that I started doing that myself, and I started putting more content out in the past 6 months, the minute that I started doing that, meant that I was thinking about the work that I was doing more because I was trying to do it for content. And that then led to me having way more unique points of view and realizations and observations on my line of work that I started to learn how to articulate them. And that started to make me more self-confident, which bled into things like this and meetings and public speaking and all those kind of things. That the Ash Jones that's speaking today is a very different Ash Jones from the one that you spoke to a year ago. And this Ash Jones is someone who will close more deals than the one a year ago, because he talks in a way that it's just obvious that I think about these things, and that comes across in value to people, and people must think, oh, this guy knows his shit. Yeah. And that sells.
Yeah,
that
you built confidence
sells.
as well, haven't you? You built confidence over the last year by having success with the clients you've worked on, and that's helped you as well, because as you said, when you left Social Chain, you didn't have the network, you didn't have the black book, you didn't really have the case study. It was just the name Social Chain behind you.
Yeah, but I think through the process of me trying to create content, and then putting that content out into the world and getting the validation back from it, it's led to me to be a million times more self-confident in how I'm saying it to people. And that self-confidence and assurance and also guidance. So there's a real, like, with the relationship between me and Steve Bartlett was like, he's the alpha 100%. And I'm just like leading in his direction. But now how I'm working with clients is that they're all CEOs. They're doing amazing things and they're way like more prestigious than me and doing great things. But I'm starting to impose on them, and I'm leading them through the way that I'm speaking and things like that. And I think that confidence and self-assurance in what you say and believe in what you say as well, because you've thought about it so much for content and come to those conclusions by observing what you're doing, your line of work, that gives you the self-confidence, and that portrays, which then makes people buy and trust, which makes you a better entrepreneur.
Yep. Yeah,
and it helps the business.
It's so true, and I love everything you're saying there, because I think that's also the important lesson for everyone listening, is that this journey that you go on in this area will have so many benefits to not only your points of view, your learning, your own personal development, your own self-confidence. All of these things are benefits and outcomes of getting this right and investing in it. If an agency CEO's job is vision, sales, and culture, which is typically what it is, then that sales part, whether you're a creative or an engineer and you've not been used to selling, all of a sudden, because you're not a mass extrovert, Ash, are you? I mean, those who know you know that you're probably the complete opposite personality-wise to someone like me or Steve, who's but more like P. You are much more inward, but you've managed to, in my opinion, do this extremely successfully, and I think you fly quite a big flag for people who are more introverted or ambiverted. You need to go down this route, who are like, I can't do this. But actually, you have superpowers, introverts, because often you're better writers. You do think more deeply. You're able to, be less superficial. Did you agree with that?
100%. And I've seen it with a couple of clients where they're super introverted and they're super skeptical of the approach. And I don't put expectations. I almost treat it like I'm the therapist, and it's therapy. And I'm like, in this environment, I need you and you need you to just be open. Yeah. And if you're open, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to do a single thing. All I'm asking is that you give this a chance. And through doing that, it helps them take the step forward that they almost need. And I've started working with a new client recently, and I could just tell he was super cold on, like, he's a real hard one to crack. And I knew that a way of approaching it would be really beneficial for his business, but I knew he was completely against doing it. And I just said to him, like, let's just try this approach, and we'll jump on a phone call and discuss things through, and there's no pressure. We don't have to do anything. And we did it. And he messaged me a few days later, and he was like, I'm glad we did that, because I actually think that's a really good point, and I'd have never have said it. And I was like, that's it. And it's like almost sometimes they just need to convince themselves, and part of my job is doing that. And you're right, like I'm the most introverted person in the room, and it's took me a lot of time to be able to, like, I work with Oliver Cookson, who's the founder of My Protein, and for me to have to find the confidence to tell someone who's built a business and sold it for £58 million to do something and have conviction in what I say, that could only ever have come from me doing the process of me creating my own content and having that unique thought, which then builds my own self-confidence in what I do and what I sell and how I deal with clients. So I think it just has obviously there's the effects that we can talk about in terms of it helps drive leads, new business, conversations, opens doors, brand awareness, all this kind of thing. But I think there's so much more to the piece that people aren't understanding of the whole like entrepreneurial puzzle and business puzzle.
Yeah, I think you've helped me understand that today as well. I've always looked at it much more as, a really important part of building up, the business brand, and from a sales and marketing perspective, the importance. But actually, you are right. Everything you said, I think there's so many other periphery benefits to doing it as well. I think also the fact that it's infectious. I think as leaders, if you do it, I think it's probably a good question to ask. I think, in fact, it may have even happened at our event 2-3 years ago. Someone sort of asked the question, said, well, yeah, but what happens when Stephen Bartlett one day decides he doesn't want to be at Social Chain anymore? And actually, what's happened there with Katie is amazing, isn't it? The way that spread through. Share that story.
Yeah, so the Stephen Bartlett part was a success, and it just made sense within the company. We looked around the company, and there was clearly several other people that had something to say and had potential. And like you say, the people always say, like, I've heard that thing before, like, what happens when Stephen Bartlett leaves? But like, you can't avoid him being like great, and you shouldn't like bottle someone's voice because one day they might move up. And the impact really is like through them doing that, you open the door for everyone else. So one of my clients said that they survey internally the agency every year, and on a number of questions. And one of the questions is, what is your reason for being at the business? And the response of the CEO increased tenfold from the year before. And he said, he was like, it's my LinkedIn output, because he's had people privately come up to him and say, like, it's really inspiring, the things that you're talking about online, and it makes me like believe in the business. And then another person said that we started working together, and within 3 weeks he said, four members of the team have started doing more online, and it's really interesting to see that the knock-on effect of me doing it is them doing it. And yeah, the perfect example was Social Chain, in that you had Katie Leeson, and it was kind of like take the fundamentals of what we'd learned through the Steve Bartlett thing, and Katie started doing her own thing.
Katie's the managing director and Steve's the CEO, right?
Yeah, so Katie's the managing director of Social Chain Agency UK, and she was like, again, she's like me, she's super introvert, but that worked for her and she owned it. And you had several people within the business that started doing the personal brand thing, and there's a guy called Mike Blake Crawford. He's the strategy director, and he's like a global public speaker now. And it's just a model that really, really works, and it has this knock-on effect. And you start empowering at the very least, some of the senior management. If not, it bleeds further down. And the CEO can't always be there. The CEO can't do everything and run everything. So it's important that you have those other faces as well.
And Katie's like only been doing this for like a year, right?
A year. She was nominated LinkedIn's top voices after 9 months. I think it was like 9 months, near enough to the day, from the first thing she did on LinkedIn to being nominated top voice on the platform, which is unbelievable. And I'll be honest, I never would have called it. When someone said to me that Katie Leeson's building a personal brand, and I love Katie Leeson to bits, she's one of my best friends. Katie, if you're watching this, I love you to bits. But I genuinely thought, I was like, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
How wrong I was. How massively wrong.
It just goes to show how actually, and I've been a big fan of Daniel Priestley's Key Person of Influence, which is a book, that's been around for a few years, and it really highlights really fundamentally everything we're talking about today. And, and he says in there, he truly believes that within 12 months from a standing start, anybody can develop a personal brand. And I think Katie is a real, example of that, real live example of how within 9 months and probably sooner, actually. I think as soon as she started doing her podcast, I saw a couple of interviews, and, she was, and obviously it really helped because Social Chain had quite a good social following, being a social media agency. So all of those things help. But nevertheless, it's good. I think anyone listening shouldn't think that this necessarily is what I say, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with one, but it will come around a lot quicker. You'll look back in 6-12 months and you will see the rewards of your efforts if you start to go down this path.
And it's such an extrovert path as well, and that's why when I first heard about Katie doing it, I was kind of like, I don't know if it worked, because I came from the extrovert personal brand world of Stephen Bartlett, where it's like you have to be super outgoing, and introverts just didn't. It was never going to work with introverts, and Katie is the person who proved me completely wrong with it. And it's a great example. I think that as a practice, it's something internally that gets looked at, that when they go around the business and say who has to do the personal brand thing, you point to the most extroverted person in the business. And like you say, there's people that are the introverts who could do the job even better than the extroverts, because they think, like I say, a lot of this is unique thinking, and they tend to be deeper thinkers and stuff like that. And it's just creating a environment for them to flourish, and the security that they're able to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I hadn't started doing stuff, I think, Pete would eventually I started doing quite a lot of posting, and, Pete started to do more now, but, be under, I would say that if you look at the most successful post that we've had as a company, it came from Pete, not me. So I think because Pete can construct much more detailed, comprehensive, informative bits of content than probably I do. But so I think for me, I'm a massive fan of the whole introvert extrovert combination, because I think they both bring out the best in each other. And I think if you have teams where you have that yin yang, or two halves of a coin, I think that the output is even more powerful. So you've got to have it. All successful teams have a good combination of two, but I think it's important to note that just because you're an extra, it doesn't mean you're naturally always going to be the one that has to do these things. I'm seeing more and more now what I would say introverted members of our teams, people who are more creative or strategy or writers, and they're coming out of their shells now. And I think the content's actually richer for it. I think the internet will be a richer place for more introverts putting content out than, sometimes fluffy, woolly content from the extroverts. It's not all fluffy and woolly, but it's but it is definitely will be a positive thing. So there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about on this area. This is flowing really well, by the way. How I'm linking these seamless links is that you wrote this post recently about being authentic and being yourself, but you did it in a way where you told a story about your friend's girlfriend not really liking you.
I got a bit of
Did you get shit for that?
Yeah.
But let's apologize to her up front, because but it's funny because I often with more introverted people, they can come across as being blunt, a bit more aloof because they're to the point. I have an introverted daughter, and I know that sometimes I've got to be a bit softer in her comms, and she's more ambiverted, but she definitely has introverted traits. But that sometimes you can come across as whilst us extroverts come across superficial, introverts come across sometimes a bit too blunt to the point, and you seem like you don't like people, but it's not that you don't like them, it's just who you are. But your point was really good, because you sort of made the point that that you are, who you are online is who you are offline, right, Ash? It's the same person.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that post is like a perfect example of unique thinking, because the point can be generic. What you're talking about can be generic. It's very hard to talk about something that nobody's ever spoke about before. And the point that I was talking about there was authenticity, which a million people have spoken about. But no one has said it in the way that I said it there. And that comes from really, I've been thinking about authenticity for 4 years now. And it took me 4 years to get to this point where I've been like, oh, it's kind of like I've chewed the fat on it enough that I've come to a really unique point of view that makes a piece of content that stands out like that did, where I can open it up. I'm able to link the personal aspect into the business aspect and things like that. Whereas if you're not making those observations and reflections, and you don't care and you don't think about these things, you're never going to get to that point. You're just going to have the generic point that authenticity is important, which nobody will ever resonate with. So yeah, that post particularly was an interesting one, because I think it kind of was the perfect example to me of the thing that I'm trying to say to people is if you observe and reflect, you're able to come up with these points of view, and you're able to own it in a way that nobody else has. It's very hard to say to people, to say something that is completely unique. But that's where the value is, to say something that's unique. But when you put it through the tinted glasses of unique just means your experience, nobody else can have that experience. That's what makes something unique. And that's why I think a lot of people have points of view, even though they don't, on generic things like COVID, like work from home. It's the most dull topic in the world right now. But I've just done a piece with a client on it, and I would be the first person to go, no more work from. I'm done. I've literally heard to the ends of the earth of it. But he had a super interesting, unique point of view on it. And that's because he sent me the email at 1 a.m. That's how I know it was unique, because it's the time when people like business owners tend to think things over and get a bit deep on what they're thinking about. And the opening line was just killer. And yeah, it's that unique thinking, that post on authenticity. I'm kind of going off the point now. What was your question again?
No, I mean, I think you are, Ian. It's about, I think, my original point was really around just making sure that, you're not posting, in some kind of alter egoed state, it's just, you just got to be who you are. And I think, what I was saying was, if someone doesn't like you in real life, they probably won't, they shouldn't like you online, and if they like you online, then they won't like you on real life, and I think on social media, sometimes I find people, look, I think the problem is that as soon as anybody raises themselves up with a point of view, a bit like, American politics or Brexit, there's always a 50-50 split, and you become Marmite. Half the people that suddenly have heard of you love you and like you, and the other half don't like you. And I've seen this in business before social media happens. The people that I met in my early years of business who were very good at networking and had big networks, I didn't know them. Sometimes I would think, I'm not sure if I like them. It's a stupid concept, but actually when I get to meet them, I go, wow, you're actually a really nice person. And I think what I like about people say about me is, because I have the same, people like me or they don't like me, and I'm happy with that. But what people all say to me is, and one of my best friends said this to me recently. He said, you are exactly the same in real life, whether you like it or not, that when you are on the vodcast, what you see is who you are. And I think Simon said it recently as well, who helps produce the show. And I think what I'm trying to say is I've seen some people go online and almost, I'm like, that's just not the real them.
Not you.
No, it's not them. They're trying to be somebody else.
Do you know what that is? I think that's external influence. So I have it with a client, and he was driven to do the trying to build a voice for all the wrong reasons. And it was because he felt that other people were doing it and therefore he needed to do it, and the expectations, and also what he needed to talk about. None of it was coming from him. It was all coming from external factors. So the minute that happens is the minute that you drift, because you're doing things that you have convinced yourself that someone else is expecting of you. And it was so strange that and I'd screenshot some of the things that he said, and I said, the problem that you have here, I said, it's fine to do this, but the problem that you'll have is you're gonna go on a panel and someone's gonna be following you online and seeing what you talk about, and you're gonna speak at the panel and they're not gonna match up. They're gonna know two different people, and you can't have that happen. It goes against the whole point of it. It's creating a voice, and the job that I do is helping someone create a voice on a medium, which is social media. But someone else could help them do it on public speaking. Someone else could help them do it in PR. It's all just helping someone communicate a voice. And the minute that you start drifting from that very fundamental idea of helping you put your voice somewhere is where it goes wrong. That's where authenticity comes from. It also comes from they have to want to do it. And I've seen it with clients where the driver for them doing it is not them. And I don't get responses to emails. I send 9 emails a week saying, hey, what's going on? And I just get ignored, because the intrinsic motivation for doing it isn't there. It's come from someone else in the business, or it's come from an external driver. And if that's the case, don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because it's counterproductive. If you really don't care about it, don't do it. But allow yourself to not believe the bullshit of, oh, everyone else is doing it, therefore I have to, and killing yourself in your own head with that battle of you really pushing it away and all the external factors pulling it to you, and just own it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I think.
Do you think, like, talking about sort of, you did touch on this earlier on, but when you do end up with a much bigger team, and that, and you do empower, let's say, your, the wider employees to talk about what they do, where does the risk come in? I wonder. I guess the big question is when you've got a really big company and you've got, hundreds of thousands of employees, how do you have the control mechanisms that maybe someone won't write something that actually could be, potentially, I don't know, not the company's perspective or point of view? I guess there's got to be some really good guidelines around when you post, it's your own point of view, not necessarily the company's, because there must be some challenges that arise. Do you find that? Because I know you're working very much with sort of teams, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm working most of the time directly with the CEO, and stakeholders come into play. So there's a really good example of a piece of client content recently where me and the client, who's in the senior leadership team, both thought it's a fantastic piece of content, this, and there was a reason across the stakeholders that meant it wasn't. And the thing there is, like, again, it's another part of my job, is that I have to create an environment where they're able to, I need to know the politics as well of the business. So trust really comes into it. And they need to be able to, like, share whether something is the right thing to say or not. And a lot of it does come from they know internally whether it's right or not. And I'll also notice, I've picked up on things a few times, and I've just pulled the little line out and I've been like, are you sure this is okay to say? In terms of politics of the business, whether that's the team, investors or clients or whatever, and it just has to. I think it's the sounding board where it's better to have, like, a few, not just yourself to bounce it off, someone to say, wait a minute, we can't say this, or is this okay to say? And just ensuring back and forth, because it can happen and it does happen. And sometimes it can't be avoided, but it's never been, someone asked me this the other day, like, what are the risks of doing it? And I went on to speak about the risks, and that was one of the risks. Like, stakeholders, you could say something that could affect the internal politics of the business, and it is a risk. But in the thousands of pieces of content that I've created, it's happened maybe twice, and it's never been a problem.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about it, and because I know that will put fear in people.
Yeah.
And
it's
the
funny
reality
you said that. I was thinking the same. I thought I don't want to talk too much about negatives today because I know, but because I know that. But I think some people, we're only human, right? And every now and then we'll all write something that maybe we regret writing because we wrote it in the spur of the moment, or we thought we were being funny, but maybe it backfired, And I think, we had a little incident this week where that happened with me. And, but listen, my most famous client that I ever had was Gerald Ratner. And do you know who Gerald Ratner is? No, you see, no one under the age of 35 knows who he is, so it's quite funny. In fact, probably no one under 40, do you think, Pete, knows who he is?
I think they'd struggle.
If you go on to after we talk, Ash, if you look up Gerald Ratner, he lost his whole £200 million empire by doing a talk at the CBI where he used to own a jewelry chain called Ratner's. And Ratner's is a bit like H. Samuels, and he's like the biggest faux pas of all time. Like on Sky, they do like the top 50 things that people said that went wrong, and he famously labelled. So he basically said that the general public. I mean, no one would write this in a million years, like when you think about it. But he wrote. He actually wrote, basically, what I sell is crap. So he's both famous for this, the general public like buying crap and we sell it. And in fact, I think he said we have a decanter that's the same price as a Marks and Spencer's prawn sandwich.
He did say
and the next day, every single national newspaper said that Gerald says the general public like buying crap. And he actually became a client of ours, and I helped him with the comeback. We helped him with the comeback of his jewelry online, and he became the UK's largest online jeweler. And it was, he said one thing, but actually, if he looks back, he was trying to tell a joke that kind of backfired. And I just think that as you said, those things are so rare and few and far between. But I guess there's got to be some moral compass or something in your head that does just say. Maybe avoid certain things,
Yeah. I think why it's important to have the sounding board. That's where the sounding board comes in.
Yeah. If you're worried, I mean, I think 99% of what I write wouldn't harm a fly, but excuse me, every now and then, I might have to talk about a difficult subject, and then I need to kind of get some counsel and go, look, I want to say this, but I need a bit of an empathetic point of view from somebody else. How would you feel if you read this? How would it make you feel without overthinking it, of course, because otherwise it would slow the whole process down. So how do you think things will, so a couple last questions. I mean, how do you think the landscape has changed because of the last few months? Because everyone's been forced almost to be in front of LinkedIn all of a sudden, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, you've noticed, I'm sure. I mean, it started off those first few weeks where all we saw was people sharing Zoom screens because they'd suddenly discovered video communication, right?
Yeah.
And that was getting a little bit boring, wasn't it? Just seeing, hey, we're working remotely. Here's how you can do it too. But actually, do you think that it's changed? It's helped accelerate, helped accelerate this whole kind of movement for people to develop their personal brands?
Yeah, I think accelerate was the word that I was thinking of. I think it was happening anyway, and this has just sped it up. And I think it's done it in a really healthy way. So beforehand, what you saw on LinkedIn was win, positivity, success, and that's it's a really toxic picture to paint for people. And I say that because a friend messaged me yesterday, and he's a young business owner, and I'll read the text out to you, and it's quite interesting when we talk on this point. So this is a small, young business owner. And he said, one of the things I think is perfectly natural, but not healthy at all, is I often see other people's success. And because I own a business and can theoretically go in many directions, I compare myself to them. So that's a really toxic thing for business, like our industry, to have people thinking those things. And pre-COVID, LinkedIn was like very heavy success, win, all good, like positivity. And that's where that comment comes from. It comes from those things. It comes from having a wrong and it's the thing that Instagram gets slammed for in terms of like young people and mental health and things like this, is it creates the wrong picture. And I think the COVID thing is like, it's taken away the professionalism and it's taken away the bullshit, and it's just brought this level of authenticity and real and vulnerability. Human is the best word for it. And it's allowed people who before would never say something bad because it looks bad for business to get the validation that everything that they're seeing is a challenge and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely helped accelerate just where it was going anyway. But the thing that it's helped has allowed it to not go in a more like continue the toxic, unhealthy narrative of it. And it's helped to bring a more balanced. So personal branding now as a term, like content can be more balanced now. And that's a much healthier place for
do you remember do you remember the earlier on this year, was it this year's gone so slow and then so fast. I can't remember whether it was end of last year, but there was the guy who was talking from Singapore on BBC, and his wife and babies ran in. Now he became an international superstar because the fact that someone had walked in on the back of a live TV show, and now, like, that would be nothing, right? The amount of like Zoom calls that Pete and I have done with screaming babies and kids crawling in and dogs. We had, I think it was Ryan O'Keefe's dog jump on the chair once when he went to the toilet, didn't realise, and the dog was Zoom chatting to us. Yeah. And I name checked him because he wrote a comment earlier on, and so actually, it's quite, it's amazing how normalized, that behavior has been. People in their dressing gowns having meetings, or, people having to wear baseball caps when business meetings. And I think it's really great the way that everything has changed through this period. I think and I like the humility of LinkedIn a little bit. I think it did definitely. It stopped becoming it lost its fakeness a little bit, a little falseness, as you say, that success thing. I've always tried not to be too that way, but I'm always a positive thinker. But it's, I think it's been much more, people have been much more grateful and thankful for things that have happened to them in their storytelling as well, not always just taking the credit themselves for the great idea, So listen, it's been a real pleasure. We could probably keep talking forever.
Yeah, I think the thing with this is like we could have sat and had this conversation and talked about like the ROI and the brand awareness and all the tactical stuff and the things that maybe I've spoke about in the past and stuff like that. And I'm really glad that this conversation didn't go down the generic route of what a personal branding conversation could have been about. Yeah. I feel like it went a lot deeper and more meaningful and stuff like that. This is a conversation that on personal branding that you won't hear this conversation anywhere else.
No, exactly. So, it's not, you're right. There's other conversations about measurement and things like that. But the reality is that, anyone who just happens to, who wants to understand, how, especially I would say, I would probably argue, because I know more about service businesses than like your CEO does a vitamin business. But from my point of view, with a service business, your book, people buy you on trust and trust, and expertise. And this is a way for you to build trust and expertise by communicating your point of view and your knowledge on the subject you talk about. And I really believe that this format, is something that everybody should find their own. I think the key here, Ash, I'm sure you agree, is to find your own unique way of finding, you know, who you are through this process, and not trying to be somebody else or just copy everybody else. So thank you very much for giving up your time.
No, thank you for having me on, and thank you for everything so far. You've been such a help to me in business, and I appreciate it every single day. So
listen, the feelings are mutual. Pete and I, you know, this isn't a one-way thing. You know, so we have a good partnership, and you've been fantastic for my clients, and you know, that helps us look good, so we're happy. So it's good.
Everyone's a winner.
Have a great weekend. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. This one's been booked in for such a long time, and I'm so pleased that we got to make it happen as we're coming out of lockdown. The pubs are open tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., I've just been told. So I've already booked my place in a pub. I'm looking forward to a normal night out tomorrow night with the missus. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you've learned. I hope you've taken there's been a lot of takeaways from Ash, and I think his genuinely real authentic story about, you know, how it does take a little bit of focus and hard work and authenticity, but it doesn't matter whether you're introverted or extroverted, you have a real opportunity now to, you know, to be able to talk about the work that you do, and talk about your approach to your agency, and to help raise your profile. And in turn, hopefully lift your new business up as well. So thank you for tuning in. Until the next time.